They were planning to erase me from the family that never really claimed me. Not with rage or fists, but with smiles, champagne, and signatures on a dinner check. Tonight was their celebration. Of legacy, of wealth, of the real Bennett heir, sealing a deal that might save our crumbling empire. And I was the ghost they forgot to delete. The son of their daughter who dared to love a black man. The reminder they kept hidden behind polished manners and well-framed portraits. I wasn't supposed to be here, but I came anyway. And this time, I wouldn't fight to belong. I'd watch them erase me and let them finish the job, because they had no idea they were signing away something far more valuable than their pride. I adjusted the cuffs of my charcoal suit, the same one I wore the night the Ember opened its doors. It still held the scent of saffron and smoke, and something quieter. Resolve. In the mirror, my reflection stared back with a calm I hadn't always earned. I used to dream of this family loving me. Now I just hoped they would reveal who they truly were. Tonight, they would toast to their future, unknowingly sitting at a table I built from the ashes of their rejection. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for clarity, and maybe for goodbye. My mother was the only one in the Bennett family who ever looked at me like I was whole. Rachel Bennett, bright, wild, unapologetic, fell in love with Elijah Carter, a jazz musician with hands that told stories even when he wasn't playing. They met at a summer festival, and the scandal bloomed before their first song ended. Her family threatened to cut her off. She married him anyway, and when I was born, half their world recoiled. Half hers, half his. But to her, I was everything. She died when I was 11. Car accident. My father passed 3 months later from a stroke that no one called grief. But I knew. That's when the Bennetts rescued me. It was the word they used, as if my existence had been some tragic stray in need of discipline. They moved me from a sunlit apartment filled with records and warmth into a stone-gray mansion with silence in the walls. They fed me, clothed me, schooled me. But love? That was off limits. My presence was a duty, not devotion. At dinner, they'd introduce me not as a grandson, but as Rachel's boy. I learned early that tolerance wasn't the same as belonging, and silence wasn't peace. It was exile in disguise. Grayson always made it clear I was never meant to stand beside him, only slightly behind. He was the family's crown prince, the golden boy with perfect teeth and a jawline sharp enough to cut trust. Every holiday, every family meeting, every whispered hallway plan revolved around him. I was the shadow, present, tolerated, never praised. At 16, they laid out my future like a resume draft. Dartmouth. Business, of course, Uncle Stephen said. You'll support Grayson when he takes the reins. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a life sentence dressed in formality. I went, wore the suits they chose, sat in classrooms they admired. On paper, I obeyed. But after dark, I came alive. I worked prep shifts at a bistro off-campus. Washed dishes, chopped aromatics, begged for station time. The smell of garlic and hot oil made more sense to me than anything I read in those business textbooks. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew it wasn't to some assistant role in a legacy firm run by men who laughed when I entered a room. The shift happened quietly. One night at a charity gala in New York, I drifted from the reception to the kitchen, asked the chef if I could help clean. She looked me over, handed me a knife, and said, "Prove it." Her name was Carmen. She didn't smile, but when she tasted the sauce I fixed, she stared at me a long moment, then said, "You don't belong in a boardroom, kid. You belong in fire." The next morning, I emailed my department head. Leave of absence, effective immediately. When I told the family, Grayson rolled his eyes. "You're throwing away everything we gave you." I replied, "No. I'm walking toward what I finally chose for myself." I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 roommates who also worked the line, took out loans, scraped together scholarships. 3 jobs, 12-hour days, burns I still carry on my hands. But for the first time in my life, I felt still. I never told the Bennetts where I was. They never asked. We fell into silence again, but this time it was mine. Not punishment, not rejection, sanctuary. The ember wasn't born with a spark. It came slow, like heat that never announces itself, just rises until something changes. After culinary school, I moved kitchen to kitchen. Each place gave me something: burns, calluses, bruises, but also instincts. I learned to keep my head down and my palate sharp. I didn't climb. I grew. Then one night, at a pop-up dinner for a friend, a man quietly asked to meet the chef, Dylan Reyes, a critic known for being unkind. He'd tasted my duck confit and stayed silent through all 7 courses. His review arrived a week later. A new voice in the city's culinary conversation, quiet, deliberate, powerful, like jazz translated into flavor. That cracked a door. And through that door walked Victoria Lang. She met me after a gallery dinner I helped cater. Didn't ask about profit margins. She asked what scared me more, failing or being seen. I didn't have an answer. 2 months later, I stood inside a bare brick storefront in Soho, holding a lease in my name. The Ember opened with 18 seats, no sign, just a copper door and a menu that changed weekly. At first, we barely made rent, but people started talking, then lining up. We grew, but carefully. No franchising, no ego. Just food and people who cared enough to do it right. I paid more than standard, gave second chances. Taught what I knew to anyone who stayed long enough to listen. I called it the Ember for a reason. Embers burn quiet. Slow. They don't demand attention, but they never die out. That's what I wanted to be. Steady, warm, undeniable. 3 years in, we're fully booked. 2 more locations on the way. Investors call, but I answer less. We're not a brand. We're a kitchen with a heartbeat. And I was finally okay with being unseen, until a letter arrived. Thick envelope, golden seal. My name absent from every line. But the address. The Ember. Their newest celebration, it seemed, would happen in the house I built. The envelope was thick, embossed, ivory, and sealed in gold. It sat on the edge of my desk, like a relic from a world I thought I'd burned down years ago. I opened it slowly, half expecting the paper to sneer. You are cordially invited to a private Bennett family celebration in honor of Grayson Bennett's strategic investment partnership. It was signed by my uncle. No mention of me. No acknowledgement of where I'd been or what I'd done. Just an invitation. Like I was one of the countless extended cousins orbiting the real family star. But the location, that stopped me cold. The Ember. My restaurant. My kitchen. My name. Just not on the invitation. I stared at it for a full minute, the air still around me like the moment before a glass shatters. There were only 2 explanations. Either they'd chosen the Ember by coincidence, or Grayson had lied again. That afternoon, I asked my front-of-house manager, Kira, to pull the reservation file. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She'd been with me since the start. She knew when silence meant thunder was coming. The reservation had been placed under the Bennett Foundation, requested directly through one of our financial contacts. Kira told me Grayson had claimed to be close friends with the restaurant's owner and had promised VIP exposure for a private equity group backing Bennett Capital's restructuring efforts. So that was the play. He'd leveraged a name he never built to try and save a legacy that was never really his to lose. And they all bought it. Because who would question a Bennett? The irony was sharp enough to taste. They had chosen the Ember because it was exclusive, because it gave their sinking brand the illusion of relevance. And yet, not a single one of them knew whose fire they were walking into. I considered canceling the reservation, but something held me back. I wanted to see them, really see them. Not from behind a plate or through whispers at family funerals. I wanted to sit across from them, hear the words, watch the glances, let them decide, unknowing, how they'd treat a man they thought still belonged beneath them. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't here to gloat. I just needed clarity, needed proof that the person I used to be no longer needed their permission to exist. I told Kira to confirm the reservation. No special treatment, I added. They think they're customers. Let's keep it that way. The night of the dinner, I dressed simple. A dark navy blazer, charcoal slacks, no tie. Clean-shaven, polished but unassuming. I walked through the back entrance, past the line cooks prepping amuse-bouches with quiet intensity, and stood for a moment just beyond the kitchen doors. Through the slatted glass I could see them. Grayson at the center, laughing too loudly. My uncle scanning the room like a general counting victories. My aunt adjusting her pearls for the third time. They looked comfortable, powerful, untouchable, and they had no idea. I turned to Kira and whispered, "Let them be seated. I'll enter as a guest." She blinked, then nodded. There was no need to ask why. I wasn't stepping into that dining room to be seen. I was walking in to see. The dining room glowed in soft amber light. Our signature aroma, rosemary, citrus, slow braised stock, greeted me like an old friend. Everything was just as I had designed it, and they, the Bennetts, sat right in the center, glowing with a confidence built on assumption. Grayson noticed me first. He stood, flashed that easy smirk. "Didn't expect you'd actually show," he said, voice soaked in performative charm. "Wouldn't miss it," I answered. He pointed to the seat furthest from the center. I took it without hesitation. I already knew how this night would go. Richard raised a glass. "To family," he said. "And to Grayson, who's guiding us forward during uncertain times." Glasses clinked. Smiles stretched tight. "So," Carolyn began, "you're still in food?" Her tone was honeyed poison. "Still am." "Pop-ups? Catering?" she asked, as if naming lower rungs on a ladder she assumed I hadn't climbed. "Hands on," I said. Grayson chuckled. "He means he's plating salad for tech bros in Brooklyn." I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The amuse-bouche arrived. Compressed watermelon with smoked salt and preserved mint. Grayson lifted it skeptically. "So this is what we're doing now?" "It's a palate opener," I replied. Carolyn pushed hers aside. "When I go out, I expect food, not concepts." The meal progressed. Courses came and went. My scallops, my beet gnocchi. No one at the table tasted anything, only judgment. No compliments, only commentary. Then Richard cleared his throat. "We've been reviewing the trust," he said. Grayson leaned forward, smiling like someone about to deliver good news, only to the right people. "The board has decided it's time to simplify. Protect the family legacy. Your name will be removed from the estate." Just like that. No warning, no build-up. They didn't even have the grace to call it what it was: banishment. "It's nothing personal," Grayson added, as if he were offering me an out. "You've built a different life. We're just formalizing that." I looked around the table. Not one face met mine directly. All of them had known since childhood that I didn't belong. Tonight, they just said it out loud. "Is that why I'm here?" I asked. "To watch it happen face to face." Richard lifted his glass again. "We thought it better to be honest. And in that stillness, the kind that follows betrayal but precedes clarity." I nodded. "Then let's make it clean," I said, voice calm as ever. No one knew what I meant. Not yet. Grayson motioned for the sommelier like a man about to bless the room. "Let's celebrate," he said. "Bring the 82 Margaux, the big one." I didn't flinch. I knew the bottle. Rare, extraordinary, and completely wasted on him. As chatter resumed around the table, I took out my phone. "Hi, Dana. It's Noah Carter. Pull the funding." "All of it. Effective immediately." She didn't ask why, just confirmed. The wine arrived. Grayson raised his glass. "To the Bennett legacy, and to the partnerships that will keep us on top." I drank water. Marcus delivered the check folder. Grayson opened it with ceremony, then frowned. "There's a mistake," he muttered. "They didn't charge us for the food." Richard leaned over. "Let me see that." Grayson flagged Marcus. "You missed something." Marcus glanced at the bill, then at me. I gave the slightest nod. "No mistake, sir," he said evenly. "Dinner was covered." "By who?" Richard asked. Marcus turned back, his tone shifting. "Mr. Carter," he said. "As always, silence." Carolyn blinked. "As always?" I placed my napkin down slowly. "I own the Ember." Grayson froze. "You?" "Yes." Richard's voice dropped. "You're the investor?" "No. I am the investment." I looked around. "The deal you were pitching Dana Rothman, that was never your connection, Grayson. It was mine." She reached out to me. I listened, and tonight I walked away. Carolyn looked stunned. "You pulled the funding?" "Yes, all of it, hours ago." Grayson opened his mouth, closed it. "I hoped this dinner would show me something different," I continued. "But it didn't. So instead of saving a legacy that never included me, I'm building something that will." Richard shook his head. "Over dinner banter?" "No. Over a lifetime of being unseen." Grayson snapped. "You'd throw it all away?" I met his eyes, calm. "I didn't throw anything away. I stopped trying to save what never saw me as worth keeping." The silence was thick now, uncomfortable, undignified. The kind of silence that settles when illusions fall, and no one has the words to sweep up the shards. Richard reached for his wine like it might anchor him, but his hand trembled ever so slightly. Carolyn looked down, studying her empty plate as though answers might be buried beneath the sauce she barely tasted. Grayson, always quick to recover, straightened in his chair. "Okay, look, maybe things got a little tense tonight, but that doesn't mean we can't find common ground. You've built something impressive, Noah." "That's obvious now. Maybe we start over. Talk like equals." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Equals. You spent the last hour mocking my work, my worth, and my presence at this table. You erased me from the trust, publicly no less. And now that you realize I hold something you want to negotiate." Richard leaned in, trying for that fatherly tone he used on Grayson during boardroom disputes. "We acted out of concern for the family's direction. You know how delicate legacy planning can be." I met his gaze evenly. "Legacy isn't delicate. It's deliberate. And you chose to protect the Bennett name by cutting away the only part of it that wasn't built on pretense and entitlement." Carolyn spoke then, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. "So what now? You just let the company collapse out of spite?" I paused, letting the weight of the question hang. "No. I let it collapse because it's already hollow. What would I be saving?" A boardroom full of men who think integrity is a PR strategy. A family brand that sees blackness as a blemish? Grayson exhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm being done. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, placing it gently in the center of the table. Richard hesitated before picking it up, reading the header aloud. The Elijah Rachel Carter Culinary Foundation. It's a non-profit, I said. Launched this morning. Initial funding fully secured. Its mission is simple: to support underrepresented youth in pursuing culinary education, entrepreneurship, and generational self-worth. Richard's lips tightened. You used the capital we offered. No, I used the power I built when you weren't looking. Grayson scoffed, but softer this time. So that's it. You walk away? Yes, I said, rising from my seat. I walk away from the table that never made room for me. I stop setting fire to myself just to keep your image warm. I choose to build something that doesn't require me to shrink in order to belong. For a moment, no one moved. No defense. No defiance. Just silence. I adjusted my cufflinks. Enjoy the wine. It's the last pour you'll ever get on my tab. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the only kind of legacy that ever mattered to them: name, power, inheritance. But I had already chosen mine. And this time, it bore the names of people who actually loved me. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, the hum of the dining room fading behind me like the final notes of a song I no longer needed to hear. My shoes moved soundlessly over the polished floor, but the weight lifting off my shoulders echoed with every step. I didn't look back, not out of pride, but out of peace. Some things, once left behind, should stay behind. But just before I reached the threshold, I heard my name. Noah. I stopped. Turned. Grayson was standing, one hand resting on the back of his chair, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. There was no smirk now, no rehearsed ease. Noah, we didn't know, he said, about the foundation, about any of it. I nodded once. I know you didn't. That's the point. Carolyn rose next, her tone sharper, still trying to regain footing. You could have told us. You could have let us in. I tilted my head. When? Before or after you erased me from your legacy? Before or after you laughed at what I do for a living? Uncle Richard stood as well. Families argue. They say things. We were wrong, but this doesn't have to be final. I took a step closer, not aggressive, just enough to meet them clearly, face to face. I sat at that table for years, bit my tongue, tried to earn something I thought I was missing. But I realize now, I wasn't missing family. I was missing self-respect. Grayson tried again. What about the company? About working together? The Ember, what you've built. It's impressive. We could... He didn't finish. Maybe he knew better. Or maybe he just saw it in my face. That there was no offer he could make that wouldn't cost more than I was willing to pay. I didn't build the Ember to finally be invited into your boardroom, I said. I built it so people like me didn't have to knock on doors that were never meant to open. A hush fell again. Diners at nearby tables had quieted, sensing the shift in air. Even the servers had paused, their movements slowing, watching like witnesses. Noah, wait, Aunt Carolyn said, stepping forward now. We were harsh. We were wrong. But you're still a Bennett. I smiled, just barely. No, I'm not. I never was. You just let me carry the name when it suited your story. And then I turned once more, crossing into the kitchen, where the real fire lived. The staff looked up as I entered. Not one of them asked what happened. They didn't need to. One of the junior sous chefs, Marcus's niece, Chiara, looked over and asked softly, "You okay?" I nodded, grabbed an apron from the hook, and tied it around my waist. "Yeah," I said, "more than okay." Then I stepped onto the line, into the heat, into the hum of honest work, the clink of steel, the hiss of reduction, the rhythm of something real. It was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. And that silence felt like freedom. The kitchen moved like breath, steam rising, blades dancing, and quiet laughter echoing between stations. This was my sanctuary, not because it was safe, but because here I was never invisible. I walked the line, checking temps, adjusting angles, tasting sauces. Not to micromanage, but because I still loved it. In this room, everyone earned their space, and no one had to justify why they belonged. At pastry, Chiara fumbled a quenelle. I stepped in gently. "Angle it toward the drizzle. Let the plate guide the eye." She nodded, exhaling. "Got it, small moment." Bigger meaning. Later, after service, I sat by the back lockers, laptop open. I reviewed the foundation proposal, launch details, mentors, early applicants. It wasn't charity. It was a blueprint for kids like me who needed more than hand-me-down names and one-size dreams. My phone buzzed. "Grayson, meeting with the board tomorrow. Can we talk first?" I didn't reply. Another message from Marcus. Table 7 said the duck reminded them of a home they didn't know they missed. That one made me smile. Not for praise, but because it reminded me why I started. For the kid I used to be, the quiet one with calloused hands, waiting for a place to make sense. Outside, the city pulsed. I thought of my parents, of her laughter in the kitchen, his music in the living room. I carried them in my hands. Tomorrow, there'd be more to do. Another plate to serve, another young chef to guide. And I'd be there. Because the legacy that matters is the one we build from scratch.